The bitter December wind howled across the barren Colorado landscape, threatening to erase any trace of Lillian Barrett as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her thin cloak offering little protection against nature's fury. Her lips had turned blue hours ago, and she could no longer feel her fingers as she clutched the meager bundle of possessions her husband had generously allowed her to keep before abandoning her miles from Cannon City. "You're worthless to me now," Vernon's words still rang in her ears, cruel as the day she'd first heard them. "Find your own way or freeze. I don't much care which." He'd driven away in their wagon, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small pack she now carried. Lillian fought back tears that would only freeze on her cheeks. 24 years old and already discarded like unwanted goods. The 3 years of her marriage had been a slow descent into hell, Vernon's charming facade falling away to reveal a monster who used his fists to communicate disappointment. Her latest transgression, losing their unborn child after he'd pushed her down the stairs in one of his drunken rages. She squinted through the swirling snow, searching desperately for any sign of shelter. The mountain pass Vernon had abandoned her in was notorious for its deadly winter storms, and this one had descended with terrifying speed. Cannon City lay somewhere ahead, perhaps 10 miles distant, an impossible journey in her condition. Her foot caught on something beneath the snow, sending her sprawling face first into the freezing blanket of white. The impact knocked what little breath remained from her lungs, and as she lay there, a treacherous warmth began to seep through her body. "Just rest a moment," her mind whispered. "Close your eyes." Lillian knew what that meant. Her father, a doctor, had warned of the deceptive comfort that preceded freezing to death. With tremendous effort, she pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet, swaying unsteadily. "I will not die here," she whispered through cracked lips. "I will not give him the satisfaction." Another gust of wind nearly knocked her down again. Through the curtain of white, she thought she glimpsed a flicker of light, a hallucination, surely. Yet she stumbled toward it, one foot before the other, each step an act of defiance against Vernon, against nature itself. The light grew stronger. Not a mirage, then. Hope surged through her veins, providing strength she didn't know she still possessed. She opened her mouth to call for help, but only a rasp emerged. Her legs finally gave out and she collapsed into the snow, crawling now toward the distant beacon. Darkness nibbled at the edges of her vision. The last thing Lillian saw before consciousness fled was the silhouette of a man on horseback, a wide-brimmed hat outlined against the swirling snow. Lucas Blackburn pulled his coat tighter as he guided his horse through the worsening blizzard. He should have stayed at his cabin rather than risking the journey to town for supplies, but his coffee had run out, and a cowboy without coffee was like a gun without bullets, functional but deeply unhappy. At 30 years old, Lucas had long ago accepted the solitary nature of his existence. 10 years working cattle had taught him the value of self-reliance. His small ranch outside Cannon City wasn't much, but it was his, purchased with years of saved wages and sweat equity. He had 15 head of cattle, 2 horses, and no one to answer to but himself. It was enough. Or so he told himself on the cold nights when the cabin felt too quiet. The wind shifted suddenly, and his horse, Drummer, snorted and tossed his head. "Easy, boy," Lucas murmured, patting the animal's neck. "What's got you spooked?" Drummer sidestepped nervously, ears pricked forward. Lucas followed the horse's gaze and caught a glimpse of something dark against the snow, something that didn't belong in this desolate landscape. Nudging Drummer forward, Lucas approached cautiously, one hand resting on the revolver at his hip. The shape resolved itself into a human form, face down in the snow. Lucas dismounted quickly, kneeling beside the figure. "Hello, can you hear me?" He turned the person over gently, surprised to find a woman's face, pale as death save for the blue tinge of her lips. Snow crusted her eyelashes and dusted her dark hair. For a terrible moment, Lucas thought he'd found a corpse. Then her eyelids fluttered, and a weak breath escaped her lips. "Thank God," he muttered, quickly removing his heavy coat and wrapping it around her frail form. She was dangerously cold, her pulse faint beneath his fingers. Miss, can you tell me your name?" Her eyes opened briefly, striking blue, even in her near-death state, before closing again. Lucas didn't hesitate. He gathered the woman into his arms, shocked at how little she weighed, and lifted her onto Drummer's back before mounting behind her. He cradled her against his chest, trying to share what body heat he could. "Hang on, miss," he whispered, turning Drummer toward home. "Just hang on." The journey back to his cabin took twice as long as normal, the blizzard growing more ferocious with each passing minute. By the time the small log structure came into view, Lucas himself was shivering violently, his shirt offering little protection against the elements. He dismounted carefully, keeping one arm around the unconscious woman, then lifted her from the saddle. A quick check confirmed she still breathed, though her skin remained frighteningly cold. He kicked the cabin door open and carried her inside, laying her gently on his bed. The fire had burned low during his absence. Lucas quickly added kindling and logs, blowing carefully until flames leaped up, casting warm light throughout the single-room cabin. He turned back to his unexpected guest, knowing what needed to be done but hesitating nonetheless. Her wet clothes were slowly killing her. The proper thing would be to look away to preserve her modesty, but propriety wouldn't keep her alive. "Forgive me, miss," he murmured as he began removing her sodden cloak, dress, and undergarments, his movements clinical and efficient. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, then set water to boil for hot compresses. As he worked, Lucas took stock of his patient. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark chestnut hair and a pretty face marred by the lingering shadow of a bruise along her jawline. More bruises marked her arms and ribs, older injuries turning yellow and green with healing. Lucas's jaw tightened. He recognized the pattern of those bruises all too well, having grown up with a father who used his fists to make his points. Someone had been hurting this woman, and recently. The thought kindled a slow, burning anger in his chest. Once she was bundled securely, Lucas tended to Drummer, unsaddling the loyal horse and making sure he had hay and unfrozen water. By the time he returned to the cabin, snow in his hair and eyebrows, the woman had gained some color, though she remained unconscious. Lucas settled into his chair by the fire, prepared for a long vigil. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside his cabin, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Lillian floated in darkness, occasionally rising toward consciousness before sinking again into oblivion. Fragments of sensation reached her warmth, spreading through her frozen limbs. Rough but gentle hands adjusting blankets, the scent of coffee and wood smoke. Once she thought she heard a man's voice, low and reassuring, though she couldn't make out the words. When she finally opened her eyes, sunlight was streaming through a small window, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beam. She blinked, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. The ceiling above was made of rough-hewn logs. She lay in a narrow bed piled with quilts and furs near a stone fireplace where flames crackled merrily. "Where?" Her voice emerged as a croak, her throat parched. "You're awake." The deep voice came from her right. Lillian turned her head to see a man rising from a chair by the fire. He approached slowly, as if worried about frightening her, and stopped a respectful distance from the bed. "How are you feeling, miss?" Lillian studied him cautiously. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly where it brushed his collar. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He wore a simple flannel shirt and canvas trousers, with a gun belt hung over the back of the chair he'd vacated. Lillian tried to sit up and winced as every muscle protested. "I'm alive, which is more than I expected. Thank you, Mr. Blackburn, Lucas Blackburn." He moved to a small table and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "But most folks just call me Luke." Lillian accepted the cup gratefully, noting the careful way he avoided touching her fingers. As she drank, a horrifying realization dawned. She was wearing nothing beneath the blankets, nothing but a man's shirt far too large for her frame. Heat flooded her face. "My clothes." Lucas turned away quickly, focusing intently on stoking the fire. "They were soaked through. You were half frozen when I found you. He cleared his throat. "I did what was necessary to prevent the cold from taking you, but nothing more. Your things are drying by the fire." Lillian clutched the blanket tighter, mortification warring with gratitude. This stranger had saved her life and preserved as much of her dignity as circumstances allowed. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving me. I'm Lillian Barrett." He nodded, still not looking at her. "Mrs. Barrett, then. Your husband must be worried sick." A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "My husband is the reason I was out in that storm, Mr. Blackburn." Lucas turned then, his expression darkening as he took in the fading bruise on her jaw, now fully visible in the daylight. "I see," he said, his voice carefully neutral though his eyes betrayed his anger. "Well, you're welcome to stay until you've recovered. The storm's passed, but there's 2 feet of fresh snow out there, not fit for traveling yet." "I wouldn't want to impose, it's no imposition," he interrupted. "I can't in good conscience send you back out there in your condition, and I doubt you're eager to return to wherever you came from." Lillian sank back against the pillow, exhaustion washing over her. "No," she whispered, "I'm not." Lucas nodded as if her answer confirmed something. "Rest now. There's stew simmering. You should eat something when you're able." He moved to the door, reaching for his coat. "I need to check on the livestock. I'll knock before I return." After he left, Lillian took stock of her situation. She was alive, warm, and for the moment safe. Her body ached, but nothing seemed broken. The cabin was small but tidy, with a few pieces of sturdy furniture and shelves lined with books, surprising for a man who seemed to be a cowboy or rancher. Her gaze fell on her dress and undergarments, spread carefully before the fire. Next to them lay her small pack, the few possessions Vernon had allowed her to keep. Not much to show for 3 years of marriage, but then she'd gained little and lost much in that time. Lillian closed her eyes, tears threatening. How had her life come to this? The daughter of a respected doctor, she'd been educated and comfortable before meeting Vernon Barrett, a charming businessman who'd swept into their Kansas town with grand promises and an even grander smile. Her father had cautioned patience, but Lillian, 19 and eager for adventure, had fallen for Vernon's practiced charm. The first blow had come 6 months after their wedding, when his business venture failed. The second followed quickly when she suggested they seek help from her father. By then they'd moved to Colorado, far from anyone who knew her. The isolation had been deliberate, she realized too late. A knock at the door pulled her from painful memories. "Mrs. Barrett, may I come in?" "Yes," she called, ensuring the blankets covered her completely. Lucas entered, carrying a steaming bowl. Snow dusted his shoulders and hat, which he removed respectfully. "Thought you might be hungry." The rich aroma of the stew made Lillian's stomach growl audibly. Lucas's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile as he set the bowl on a small table beside the bed. "It's nothing fancy," he said, dragging his chair closer but still maintaining a proper distance. "Just venison, potatoes, and whatever else I had on hand. Lillian struggled to sit up, and before she could ask, Lucas was there, carefully arranging pillows behind her back, his movements efficient but gentle. He stepped away the moment she was settled, as if worried his proximity might frighten her. "Thank you." She reached for the stew, wincing as stiff muscles protested. "Your body's been through an ordeal," Lucas observed. "It'll take time to recover." Lillian nodded, focusing on the stew to avoid his perceptive gaze. After a few spoonfuls, she felt strength returning. "This is delicious. My ma taught me that a man who can't cook for himself deserves to go hungry." A shadow crossed his face. "She had to teach me a lot of things early on." "Is she?" Lillian left the question unfinished. "She passed when I was 15. Fever took her." Lucas stared into the fire. "Pa was gone before that. Caught a bullet in a saloon fight when I was 12. "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "It was a mercy for everyone when Pa died. He wasn't." Lucas trailed off, then fixed her with a direct look. "Those bruises. Your husband?" Lillian lowered her spoon, appetite diminishing. "Yes." "How long?" "Almost since the beginning. 3 years." She swallowed hard. He was charming when we met. By the time I saw the truth, we were married and far from my family." Lucas nodded, unsurprised. "Men like that, they're wolves wearing sheep's clothing. Masters at hiding their true nature until they have their prey where they want them. You sound like you speak from experience." "My father was cut from the same cloth as your husband, I'd wager." He gestured to a thin scar that ran along his temple. "He believed children and wives were property, to be used or disciplined as he saw fit." They fell silent, connected by the shared understanding that can only exist between those who have lived under the fist of another. "Where was he taking you?" Lucas finally asked. "He wasn't." Lillian set aside her half-eaten stew. "Vernon lost most of our money in a bad investment. He blamed me, of course, said I was bad luck." She touched her abdomen unconsciously. "After I lost the baby, he said I was worthless to him. He drove us up into the pass yesterday, told me to get out, and left me there." Lucas's expression hardened. "He left you to die?" "Yes. And if you hadn't," Lillian shrugged, "I suppose he would have told anyone who asked that I ran off or had an accident." "He's very convincing when he wants to be." Lucas stood abruptly, pacing the small cabin. "Men like that don't deserve the air they breathe." "I just want to forget him," Lillian said quietly. "Start over somewhere." Lucas paused, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You have family you can return to, my father in Kansas, but Vernon would look for me there first." She twisted the thin gold band on her finger. "I'm still legally his wife." "Not if he abandoned you to die," Lucas pointed out. "That's attempted murder in these parts." "It would be my word against his. And Vernon has friends in Cannon City now, men who do business with him, who drink with him." She shook her head. "No one would believe me." Lucas considered this, then nodded once, decisively. "Well, you're welcome here until you decide what you want to do. Once the snow clears some, I can take you into town if you'd prefer, or help you make arrangements to travel elsewhere." Relief flooded Lillian. She had expected to be turned out once she was well enough. Few people would willingly involve themselves in another's marital troubles, especially when it meant harboring a man's legal wife. "You're very kind, Mr. Blackburn." "Luke," he corrected. "And it's not kindness, just common decency." He moved to the door. "I've some chores to finish. You should rest. There are books on the shelf if you get bored." After he left, Lillian sank back against the pillows, considering her unexpected rescuer. Lucas Blackburn was nothing like the men she'd known, neither the polished gentleman of her father's circle, nor the boisterous, swaggering type Vernon had been. There was a quiet strength to him, a self-contained dignity that didn't need to announce itself. More importantly, She felt safe in his presence, something she hadn't experienced in years. 5 days passed in the small cabin, with Lillian growing stronger each day. The heavy snowfall kept them isolated, but Lucas made sure she had everything she needed for comfort. He insisted on sleeping in a bedroll by the fire, refusing to hear her protests that she was the intruder and should be the one to give up the bed. By the 3rd day, Lillian was strong enough to move around the cabin, wrapped in one of Lucas's shirts and a pair of his trousers, rolled up and belted tightly at the waist. Her own clothes, though dry, were too thin for the bitter cold and showed signs of hard wear. "I look ridiculous," she said, catching sight of herself in the small mirror Lucas used for shaving. "You look alive," he countered, not looking up from the leather he was mending. "Which is a significant improvement over how I found you." Lillian smiled despite herself. Lucas's dry humor had been a surprising discovery, emerging gradually as they grew more comfortable in each other's presence. "You think the snow will clear soon? I should try to reach Cannon City, find work." Lucas set aside his work, considering her carefully. "What sort of work were you thinking?" "I can teach children. Before I married, I worked as a governess for a family in Kansas." She smoothed a hand over the worn tabletop. "I can also keep accounts. My father made sure I was educated properly." Cannon City's growing, but it's still rough around the edges. Not many families looking for governesses. Lucas hesitated. "If you don't mind my asking, why not return to your father?" Lillian stared into the fire. "Pride, partly. I ignored his warnings about Vernon, insisted I knew better." She sighed. "And fear. Vernon has a temper, but he's also calculating. If he wanted to find me, that's the first place he'd look." Lucas nodded slowly. "Well, there's no rush to decide. You're welcome to stay as long as needed. I can't impose indefinitely. You've already been more than generous." "It's no hardship having you here." A slight flush colored his cheeks. "Actually, it's nice, having someone to talk to besides the horses and cattle." Lillian studied him, realizing how lonely his life must be. "Do you ever regret it, living out here alone?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But after my ma died, I drifted for years, working cattle drives, breaking horses for ranchers. Never stayed anywhere long." He gestured around the cabin. "This is the first place that's felt like mine, worth the solitude." "It's a good cabin," Lillian said sincerely. "Sturdy, well built." "Did it myself, mostly. Took 2 summers. Pride colored his voice. "The land's good, too. I'm hoping to expand the herd come spring, maybe add some crops." "An ambitious plan for one man," Lucas shrugged. "I manage, though I'll admit things get missed." He nodded toward the stack of mending beside his chair. "Ma would be scandalized by the state of my clothes." Lillian laughed. "I could help with that, at least. It seems a fair trade for your hospitality." "You don't have to, I want to," she insisted. "I've never been good at feeling useless." After a moment's consideration, Lucas nodded. "Much obliged, then." The next day, Lillian sat by the window, mending shirts and socks while Lucas chopped wood outside. She watched through the frosted glass as he worked, the powerful swing of the axe splitting logs with practiced efficiency. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cold, and he'd removed his coat, working in shirt sleeves that revealed muscular forearms. Lillian found herself staring, needle forgotten in her hand. There was something compelling about the sight, not just his physical strength, but the focused way he approached the task, each movement deliberate and without wasted effort. When had she last watched Vernon work? She couldn't remember. Her husband had considered physical labor beneath him, preferring to scheme and charm his way to what he wanted. Even in the early days before his true nature emerged, he'd spent more time talking about achievements than actually accomplishing them. Lucas glanced toward the window, catching her watching. Lillian quickly looked down, heat flooding her cheeks. When she dared look up again, he had returned to his work, but a small smile played at the corner of his mouth. That evening, as they shared a simple meal of rabbit stew, Lucas cleared his throat awkwardly. "I need to ride into town tomorrow. We're running low on supplies and the trail should be passable by now." Lillian nodded, ignoring the pang of disappointment. Their peaceful routine would soon end. "Of course, I should come with you, start looking for work and lodgings." "Actually," Lucas said slowly, "I was thinking you might want to stay here, just until you're fully recovered," he added hastily. "The trip to town and back is hard going, especially with the snow. And this way, you'd have more time to consider your options." Hope flickered in Lillian's chest. "You wouldn't mind. Like I said, it's no hardship having you here." He focused intently on his stew. "In fact, the place feels more like a home with you in it." The simple honesty of the statement caught Lillian off guard. Vernon had been full of flowery compliments during their courtship, elaborate phrases that had flattered her youthful vanity. But this straightforward admission meant more than all those practiced lines. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'd like to stay then, just a little longer." Lucas nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Good, that's good." They finished their meal in companionable silence, each acutely aware of something shifting between them, something fragile and unnamed, but full of possibility. The following morning, Lucas prepared for his journey to town. Lillian helped him pack provisions for the trip, their movements around the small cabin a carefully choreographed dance, each growing accustomed to the other's presence. "I should be back by nightfall," Lucas said, pulling on his heavy coat. "If not, don't worry. It might take longer to get through town than I expect." "Be careful," Lillian said, handing him his gloves. "The pass can be treacherous even when the snow's stopped." "I will." He hesitated at the door, looking back at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Lillian, when I return, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." "Oh, a proposition of sorts." He must have seen the alarm that flashed across her face because he quickly added, "Nothing improper, just an idea I've been considering about your situation." Curiosity piqued, Lillian nodded. "I'll look forward to it." After Lucas departed, Lillian busied herself with domestic tasks, determined to make herself useful. She scrubbed the cabin floor, washed the few dishes, and reorganized the shelves, pleased to be doing familiar work after days of recovery. By mid-afternoon, restlessness drove her outside, bundled in one of Lucas's spare coats. The world beyond the cabin was a pristine blanket of white, broken only by Lucas's footprints and the tracks of wildlife. She explored the small farmstead, discovering a sturdy barn where 15 cattle huddled together for warmth, a chicken coop with 6 hens that eyed her suspiciously, and a corral where Lucas's second horse, a placid mare, nudged her hopefully for treats. "Sorry, girl," Lillian laughed, stroking the velvety nose. "I didn't think to bring anything." The sun was beginning its descent when Lillian returned to the cabin, cheeks flushed from cold and exertion. She stoked the fire back to life and set water to boil for coffee, wanting to have something hot ready when Lucas returned. As darkness fell with no sign of him, Lillian tried not to worry. The journey to Cannon City was challenging in the best weather, and the recent snow would slow his progress. Still, she found herself checking the window repeatedly, straining to hear the sound of hoofbeats over the wind's mournful howl. When the door finally opened near midnight, Lillian sprang to her feet, relief washing over her. "Thank goodness." "I was beginning to worry." She stopped short at the sight of Lucas's face. His expression was grim, jaw set in a hard line, eyes blazing with barely contained fury. "What's happened?" she asked, taking his coat with trembling hands. Lucas ran a hand through his snow-dampened hair. "I saw your husband in town." The name that had haunted her sent ice through Lillian's veins. Vernon. But how did you know it was him? I didn't at first. Lucas paced the small room. I was at the general store when I overheard him talking to the sheriff. He was filing a report about his missing wife, claiming you'd run off with family valuables during the storm. The disgust in his voice was palpable. He had the nerve to suggest you might have perished in the blizzard, looking properly bereaved while telling anyone who'd listen what a tragedy it was. Lillian sank into a chair, knees suddenly weak. That sounds like Vernon, always working to control the story. He described you perfectly right down to the dress you were wearing when I found you. Lucas's expression darkened further. Said he'd been searching desperately, that he was sick with worry, and the sheriff believed him, seemed to. Barrett's got a way about him, smooth talking, respectful. Plays the grieving husband well. Lucas stopped pacing, looking at her directly. He's offering a reward for information about your whereabouts, $20. Lillian laughed bitterly. My value has increased, it seems. Lillian. Lucas knelt before her chair, close but not touching. Why would he want you back, after what he did? Control, she said simply. Vernon can't bear to think something that belongs to him might escape, and my disappearance raises questions. Questions are bad for business. Lucas nodded slowly. I thought as much. That's why I didn't say anything, though every part of me wanted to call him out right there. His eyes met hers, earnest and direct. But it means you can't go into town, not while he's looking for you. What choice do I have? I can't hide forever. You could. The words came quickly, as if he'd been holding them back. That proposition I mentioned this morning, I've been thinking about it for days. Lillian's heart pounded against her ribs. What are you suggesting? Stay here, not just until you recover, but permanently. Lucas took a deep breath. As my wife. Lillian stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Your wife. A marriage of convenience, he clarified quickly. I'm not presuming on your feelings, but as my wife you'd have protection. Barrett would have no legal claim on you. Lucas, hear me out, he urged. This place needs a woman's touch. I need help with the cattle, the garden I want to plant come spring. You need somewhere safe, away from him. His gaze dropped to his hands. We get along well enough. In time, perhaps. Perhaps what? Lillian whispered. Perhaps it could become more. Color crept up his neck. But I wouldn't expect that. Just companionship, mutual respect, safety. Lillian's mind whirled with the unexpected proposal. Marriage again, the very institution that had trapped her with Vernon. Yet marriage to Lucas would be entirely different. He had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. He made her feel safe. But was security enough reason to bind herself to another man? I need time to think, she said finally. This is unexpected. Lucas stood, nodding. Of course. Take all the time you need. He moved to the fire, adding another log. But consider this, Barrett won't stop looking for you, and if he finds you unmarried, living alone. The implication was clear. Vernon would drag her back, claiming his husbandly rights, and any resistance would be seen as a wife's disobedience rather than a woman's legitimate fear. I'll think about it, she promised. Truly. That night, long after Lucas had settled onto his bedroll by the fire, Lillian lay awake, weighing her limited options. Return to her father and risk Vernon finding her. Try to make a life alone in another town, always looking over her shoulder. Or accept Lucas's, offer a marriage based initially on practicality rather than love. But hadn't her love match with Vernon turned to nightmare? Perhaps starting with mutual respect and common purpose was the wiser path. And if she were being completely honest with herself, there was something else aflutter in her chest when Lucas smiled, a warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally brushed. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something. A spark that might, with care and time, grow into a flame. By morning, Lillian had made her decision. She found Lucas at the barn, already hard at work feeding the livestock. "Good morning," she called, pulling her borrowed coat tighter against the cold. Lucas turned, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "You're up early. I wanted to catch you before you started your day." Lillian took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I've been thinking about your proposal." He set down the hay fork, giving her his full attention. "And I have conditions." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I expected nothing less. First, this would be a true marriage, legal and binding. No pretense that could be discovered later." Lucas nodded. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Second, we would be partners in this ranch. I want to work alongside you, not just keep your house." "Agreed. I could use the help, and you've already proven you're not afraid of hard work." Lillian squared her shoulders for her final condition. "Third, we would have separate sleeping arrangements at first, until we know each other better, until I'm ready." Lucas's expression softened. "Lillian, I would never rush you or demand that, not after what you've been through." He stepped closer, his gaze earnest. "I want a wife, yes, but more than that, I want a companion, someone to share this life with. The rest can wait until you're ready, if you're ever ready." Relief and something like hope bloomed in Lillian's chest. "Then yes, Lucas Blackburn, I'll marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine after storm clouds, warm and full of promise. "You won't regret it," he said softly. "I'll do everything in my power to make sure of that." 3 days later, they rode into the neighboring town of Prospect, well away from Cannon City and Vernon's searching eyes. The local justice of the peace, a gruff man with kind eyes, performed a simple ceremony in his front parlor, his wife and daughter serving as witnesses. "Do you, Lucas James Blackburn, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the justice asked. Lucas's hand was warm around Lillian's as he answered, "I do." "And do you, Lillian Marie Barrett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Lillian looked up at Lucas, finding strength in his steady gaze. "I do." "Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." The justice nodded to Lucas. "You may kiss your bride." Lucas hesitated, clearly mindful of their arrangement. Lillian made the decision for him, rising on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his lips, brief but sincere, a promise of possibilities to come. "Mrs. Blackburn," Lucas murmured as they walked back to their horses, the name both strange and right on his tongue. "Mrs. Blackburn," Lillian repeated, testing the sound of it. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of fear lifting from her shoulders. She was no longer Lillian Barrett, Vernon's possession. She was Lillian Blackburn, Lucas's partner by law and by choice. The first weeks of marriage brought adjustments for both of them. Lucas, accustomed to solitude, found himself constantly aware of Lillian's presence, the scent of her hair as she passed, the soft humming as she worked, the gentle clatter of dishes being washed. The cabin that had once seemed adequate now felt cramped with 2 people navigating its confines. For Lillian, the challenge was learning to trust again. Despite Lucas's unfailing gentlemanly behavior, she sometimes startled when he moved too quickly, or tensed when his voice rose in frustration over a broken tool or stubborn animal. Each time, Lucas would step back, giving her space, his patient understanding a balm to wounds still healing. True to their agreement, Lucas continued sleeping by the fire while Lillian took the bed. Each night, they exchanged polite goodnights before retiring, the unspoken tension between them growing with each passing day. By the 3rd week, their routine had settled into something resembling normalcy. They worked side by side during daylight hours, Lillian proving herself adept at caring for the chickens and helping with the cattle. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation, discovering common interests and differing perspectives. Lucas was surprised to learn Lillian enjoyed reading as much as he did, and they spent many evenings discussing the books on his shelves. Thoreau seems a fitting choice for a man who lives in relative wilderness, Lillian observed one evening, turning the well-worn copy of Walden in her hands. Lucas smiled, whittling a piece of wood by the fire. Ma was educated, insisted I learn to read and appreciate good writing even after Pa died and times got hard. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. A shadow crossed his face. She deserved better than what life gave her. Lillian recognized the shadow of old pain. Tell me about her, if you don't mind. Lucas set aside his whittling, staring into the fire. Her name was Sarah. She came west with her family as a girl, settled near Pueblo. Met my father at a harvest dance when she was 18. Said he was the handsomest man she'd ever seen, with charm enough to make a girl forget her good sense. Sounds familiar, Lillian murmured, thinking of Vernon's similar effect on her younger self. Pa was fine when sober. Problem was, he rarely stayed that way for long. Lucas's jaw tightened. First time he hit her, I was maybe 5, old enough to remember, not old enough to stop him. It wasn't your responsibility to stop him, Lillian said gently. You were a child. That's what Ma always said. But I grew up fast. His fingers traced the scar at his temple unconsciously. By the time I was 12, I was tall enough to step between them. Got this for my trouble. He tapped the scar, but he never touched her again after that night. I made sure of it. Lillian set aside her book, moved by his story and the quiet strength it had forged in him. Your mother was lucky to have such a son. Lucas looked up, surprise in his eyes. Not how I would have put it. No, you wouldn't, Lillian smiled, but I suspect she thought it every day. Something shifted in Lucas's expression, a softening, a vulnerability he rarely showed. Thank you for saying that. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with unspoken feeling. Finally, Lucas cleared his throat and stood. Getting late. We should turn in. Lillian nodded, disappointment mingling with relief. Each night ended this way. Just as they approached something deeper, one of them would retreat. It was safer, perhaps, but increasingly frustrating. As February turned to March, signs of spring began to emerge. The snow receded, revealing patches of muddy ground. Birds returned, filling the morning air with song. The cattle grew restless, eager for fresh pasture after months of hay. With the changing season came new routines. Lucas and Lillian worked from dawn to dusk preparing fields for planting, mending fences damaged by winter storms, and tending to a newborn calf that arrived earlier than expected. She's so small, Lillian marveled, watching the wobbly-legged creature nurse from its mother. Will she survive? With proper care, Lucas knelt beside the calf, checking its eyes and ears. She's got fight in her, reminds me of someone else I know. Lillian felt warmth spread through her at the compliment. I'll take that as a high compliment from a cowboy, highest praise I know. Lucas's smile made her heart skip. That night, exhausted from their labors, they sat side by side on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. A comfortable silence enveloped them until Lucas spoke. I've been thinking about expanding the cabin. Adding another room, maybe 2, a proper bedroom, perhaps a small parlor. Lillian looked at him in surprise. That's ambitious. I have more reason to build now. His eyes met hers briefly before returning to the horizon. A man and woman need space, privacy. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Lillian studied her husband's profile in the fading light, the strong jawline, the slight curve of his mouth, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes. In the month since he'd found her in the snow, she'd come to know him well. His patience. His quiet strength. his unwavering respect for her boundaries, and somewhere along the way, respect had blossomed into something deeper. Something that made her heart race when their hands touched and left her lying awake at night, acutely aware of his presence just feet away. "Lucas," she said softly, "you don't need to build a new bedroom." He turned to her, confusion in his eyes. "But our arrangement was temporary until we knew each other better." Lillian gathered her courage. "I believe we do now." Understanding dawned in his expression, followed quickly by hope. "Lillian, are you saying—" "I'm saying I don't want to sleep alone tonight." She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "I'm saying I chose you as my husband in more than name." Lucas's breath caught. "Are you certain? I don't want you to feel obligated or rushed. I'm certain." Lillian squeezed his hand. "I trust you, Lucas, completely." He raised their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with such tenderness that tears sprang to Lillian's eyes. "I've fallen in love with you," he confessed, voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling that first day when you opened your eyes and looked at me like I was some kind of miracle, when all I'd done was what any decent man would do." "You are a miracle to me," Lillian whispered. "You showed me that not all men are like Vernon, that I could trust again, that I could feel safe." She moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "And somewhere along the way, safety became something more, something I never expected to feel again." "What's that?" Lucas asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. Lillian looked up at him, no longer afraid to reveal her heart. "Love, Lucas. I've fallen in love with you too." His kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. Lillian answered by threading her fingers through his hair, drawing him closer. As the last light faded from the sky, they held each other, no longer two wounded souls seeking refuge, but partners choosing to build a future together. That night, Lillian led Lucas to their bed, no longer hers alone. His touch was reverent, his patience infinite as he showed her that physical love could be tender, mutual, and deeply healing. For the first time, Lillian understood what it meant to truly give herself to another person, not out of duty or fear, but from desire and trust. Afterward, lying in the circle of Lucas's arms, she felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from pain or sorrow, but from the overwhelming relief of finding home after years of exile. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, concern in his voice as he brushed away her tears. "More than all right," she assured him. "I'm where I belong." Spring unfolded across the Colorado landscape, bringing new growth and new beginnings. Lucas and Lillian worked side by side, their partnership strengthening with each passing day. The small ranch prospered under their joint care. Vegetable gardens thrived, the cattle grew fat on fresh grass, and the chicken coop expanded to accommodate twice as many birds. True to his word, Lucas began work on expanding the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and small parlor. Lillian contributed designs based on her father's house, creating a home that reflected both their tastes and needs. "You're becoming quite the carpenter," she observed one afternoon, watching Lucas fit boards for the new bedroom's floor. He grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Amazing what a man can learn when properly motivated. The look he gave her left no doubt about his motivation, and Lillian blushed despite months of marriage. In late April, Lillian received a letter from her father, her first contact with family since marrying Vernon. She had finally written to him after much encouragement from Lucas, explaining everything that had happened and her new life as Mrs. Blackburn, Dr. William Cooper's reply was filled with relief, joy, and a father's lingering concern. "My dearest Lillian, words cannot express my gratitude at hearing you are safe and well. These past years of silence have been torturous, especially after my inquiries to Vernon were met with vague assurances that you were adjusting to married life and preferred no visitors. I feared the worst, but had no proof to act upon. To learn how he treated you fills me with rage and regret that I did not do more to prevent your marriage. Please forgive a father who failed to protect his daughter. As for your Mr. Blackburn, he sounds a remarkable man. Any husband who would offer marriage as protection rather than possession has already proven himself worthy of consideration. That you have found love with him brings me joy beyond measure. I am planning a journey to Colorado this summer and hope to meet the man who saved my daughter in more ways than one. Until then, please know you are in my thoughts daily. With all my love, Father. Lillian read the letter to Lucas that evening, her voice breaking with emotion at her father's words. He wants to visit, she said, folding the letter carefully. To meet you. Lucas looked thoughtful. Do you think it's safe? Barrett is still in Cannon City as far as we know. Father will be discreet, and he'll come directly here rather than stopping in town. Lillian touched Lucas's hand. I want him to meet you, to see the life we're building together. Lucas nodded, squeezing her fingers. Then we'll welcome him. Family should be together when possible. The simple statement, delivered without fanfare, reminded Lillian how different this marriage was from her first. Vernon had systematically isolated her from everyone who loved her. Lucas encouraged reconnection, understanding that love wasn't meant to be hoarded but shared. As spring gave way to summer, life settled into a pleasant rhythm. The expanded cabin was completed just in time for Dr. Cooper's visit in July. The reunion between father and daughter was tearful and joyous, with the elderly doctor embracing his daughter for long minutes before turning his attention to Lucas. So you're the cowboy who found my Lillian in the snow, Doctor. Cooper said, sizing up his son-in-law with a physician's assessing gaze. Yes, sir, Lucas replied, standing straight under the scrutiny. And you married her to protect her from that scoundrel Barrett. That was part of it, Lucas admitted. But I've since learned it's I who am fortunate in the arrangement. Dr. Cooper's stern expression softened. Well said, young man. He clasped Lucas's shoulder. Thank you for giving my daughter back her smile. I feared I'd never see it again. The week of Dr. Cooper's visit passed quickly, filled with long conversations, shared meals, and plans for the future. The doctor was impressed by the small ranch and the couple's evident happiness together. You've built something special here, he told them his final evening. Something many people search for their whole lives and never find. We were lucky, Lillian said, her hand finding Lucas's. Not luck, Dr. Cooper corrected gently. Courage. Both of you had to risk trusting again after being hurt by those who should have protected you. His gaze shifted between them. Don't ever take that for granted. Before departing the next morning, Dr. Cooper pulled Lillian aside. I've been watching you, my dear. There's a glow about you that a father recognizes. Lillian blushed. I haven't said anything to Lucas yet. I wanted to be certain. How long? Almost 3 months, I think. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. After losing the baby with Vernon, I was afraid to hope. Dr. Cooper examined her with professional care, then smiled broadly. Everything seems perfectly normal. You're healthy and strong. He kissed her forehead. Tell your husband. Let him share this joy with you. That evening, after her father's stagecoach had departed, Lillian and Lucas sat on their expanded porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. I have something to tell you, Lillian said, her heart racing with nervous excitement. Lucas turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. We're going to have a baby. The words rushed out, followed immediately by anxious explanation. I know we haven't discussed children yet, and it's sudden, but Lucas's whoop of joy cut her off. In one fluid movement, he was out of his chair and kneeling before her, his hands gentle on her waist. A baby. You're certain? Father confirmed it. He says I'm healthy and everything looks normal. Lillian searched his face. You're happy. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Lucas pressed a reverent kiss to her still flat stomach, then looked up at her, eyes shining. Lillian Blackburn, you've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. A home that's truly a home. Love I never thought I'd find. And now a family of our own. Lillian cupped his face in her hands. You gave me back my life, Lucas. This baby is just one more miracle you've made possible. As summer faded into autumn, Lillian's pregnancy progressed without complications. Her body rounded with new life, and Lucas found himself constantly amazed by the changes in his wife, the fullness of her figure, the radiance of her skin, the quiet confidence that seemed to grow alongside their child. You're staring again, Lillian teased one evening as she prepared dinner, catching Lucas watching her from across the room. Can't help it, he admitted without embarrassment. You're beautiful, Lillian laughed, placing a protective hand over her 6-month bump. I'm as big as one of your cows. Nonsense. Lucas crossed to her, placing his hand over hers. You're carrying our future. Nothing more beautiful than that. Their peaceful existence faced an unexpected challenge in late October. Lucas had ridden to Prospect for supplies, leaving Lillian to manage the ranch for the day. She was hanging laundry, enjoying the crisp autumn air, when the sound of an approaching wagon made her turn toward the road. Her blood froze in her veins as she recognized the man holding the reins, Vernon Barrett. He looked much as she remembered, handsome in a polished way, his clothes fine despite the dust of travel. But his eyes were cold as they fixed on her, taking in her pregnant state with a calculating gaze. Well, well, he called, pulling the wagon to a stop. If it isn't my wayward wife. And in an interesting condition, I see. Lillian's hand went protectively to her stomach. How did you find me? Vernon smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Colorado's not so large that a man can't track down his own property, given enough time and money. He climbed down from the wagon. You've led me on quite a chase, Lillian. I'm not your property, Vernon. She took a step back toward the cabin, where Lucas's rifle stood loaded by the door. And I'm no longer your wife. Vernon's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Is that so? I don't recall granting you a divorce. You abandoned me to die in a blizzard. Lillian stood taller, drawing courage from the life growing within her. That ended any claim you had. Abandoned? My dear, I've been searching desperately for you since you wandered off during our journey. Vernon's voice dripped with false concern. I've told everyone how distraught I've been, how worried for your fragile mind. The familiar tactic sent chills down Lillian's spine. Vernon had always been skilled at twisting reality, painting himself as the concerned husband and her as unstable or hysterical. No one would believe that now, she said, continuing her slow retreat toward the cabin. I have a new life, a new husband. Fury flashed across Vernon's face, quickly masked. So I see. His gaze dropped to her stomach again. Tell me, does your new husband know he's raising another man's child? The baby is Lucas's. Lillian's voice rang with truth. Conceived in love, not forced on me like a duty. Vernon's hand twitched at his side, the same tell he'd had before striking her in the past. Lillian tensed, ready to flee to the cabin if necessary. Love, Vernon sneered. How touching. And does your cowboy know you're still legally my wife? That your marriage is nothing but fraud? Our marriage is recognized by law and God, Lillian countered, reaching the porch steps. You forfeited any rights when you left me to die. A charming story. Vernon took a step forward. But one without witnesses, I'd wager. My account that you wandered off in confusion will seem far more plausible to a judge, especially when I explain how concerned I've been for your mental state since losing our child. Bile rose in Lillian's throat at his casual mention of the baby she'd lost after his violence. "You pushed me down the stairs," she whispered. "You killed our child. An unfortunate accident that seems to have affected your reason." Vernon's voice was smooth as silk, reasonable to any who didn't know the monster beneath. "Come now, Lillian. This charade has gone on long enough. Gather your things. We're returning to Cannon City." "She's not going anywhere with you." The deep voice came from behind Vernon. Lucas stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle in hand, his expression thunderous. He must have returned from town via the back trail and heard their conversation. Vernon turned slowly, assessing the newcomer with cold calculation. "Ah, the cowboy husband, I presume. Tell me, sir, do you make a habit of stealing other men's wives?" "I make a habit of protecting those who need it." Lucas moved forward, rifle steady. "And the only thief here is the man who stole 3 years of Lillian's life through lies and abuse." Vernon's charming mask slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath. "This is none of your concern. Lillian is my wife by law." "The law also frowns on attempted murder," Lucas countered. "Which is what you committed when you abandoned her in a blizzard. An unprovable accusation, perhaps." Lucas's gaze was steady. "But I don't need the law to tell me what's right. Lillian chose to stay here, chose to build a life with me. That's all I need to know." Vernon's hand drifted toward his coat, where a bulge suggested a concealed weapon. "You're a fool if you think I'll leave without what's mine." "Vernon, don't," Lillian pleaded, seeing the dangerous direction the confrontation was taking. "The lady has spoken," Lucas said, his voice deceptively calm. "I suggest you return to your wagon and leave our property." Vernon's laugh was ugly. "Your property? This woman is legally bound to me, which makes her and everything she possesses mine by right." In one fluid motion, Vernon drew a pistol from inside his coat. Before he could aim, Lucas fired. The rifle shot echoed across the clearing as Vernon stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. "You shot me," he gasped, genuine shock in his voice. "Be grateful I aimed for your shoulder," Lucas replied, keeping the rifle trained on him. "Next time it'll be your heart, if you prove you have one." Vernon looked between them, blood seeping between his fingers. The calculation in his eyes told Lillian he was weighing his options, his chances. Finally, self-preservation won out. "This isn't over," he snarled, staggering back to his wagon. "I'll see you both ruined for this." "No, Vernon," Lillian said, finding strength in Lucas's steady presence. "It is over. It has been since the day you left me to die. Go back to Cannon City. Tell whatever lies you need to salvage your pride. But know that if you ever come near me or my family again, the next shot won't be a warning." Vernon's face contorted with hatred, but the steel in Lillian's voice, so different from the fearful woman he'd married, gave him pause. With a final venomous glare, he climbed awkwardly into his wagon and turned it around, disappearing down the road he'd arrived on. Once he was out of sight, Lillian's legs gave way. Lucas was there in an instant, gathering her into his arms, rifle set aside. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, hands gentle as they cupped her face. "Did he touch you?" "No," Lillian assured him, trembling with delayed shock. "He didn't get the chance. You came home early." "Thank God for that." Lucas held her close, his heart pounding against hers. "When I saw him here with you alone, I was afraid," Lillian admitted. "Not for myself so much as the baby." Lucas placed a protective hand on her rounded belly. "He'll not harm either of you. I swear it." That night, Lucas insisted on taking the first watch while Lillian rested, unconvinced that Vernon would abandon his quest so easily. The night passed without incident, but the next morning, Lucas rode to Prospect to speak with the sheriff. He returned with unexpected news. "Barrett's gone," he announced, striding into the cabin where Lillian sat mending. Left Cannon City altogether, according to Sheriff Miller. Lillian set aside her sewing. Just like that? I don't believe it. Apparently he had debts, significant ones. Creditors were closing in. Lucas hung his hat on its peg. The wound I gave him was the final straw. He emptied his accounts and caught the eastbound train last night. Are you certain? Sheriff confirmed it. Said Barrett was already under investigation for some questionable business dealings. Your former husband chose to run rather than face the consequences. Lucas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. He's gone, Lillian, truly gone. The relief that washed over her was so profound that Lillian began to weep not delicate tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that released years of fear and tension. Lucas held her through the storm, murmuring reassurances until the tears subsided. I never thought I'd be free of him, she whispered when she could speak again. I always believed he'd find me eventually. And now. Lillian looked around the cabin that had become her home, at the cradle Lucas had lovingly crafted for their coming child, at the books they'd read together by firelight, at the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. Now I believe in new beginnings, she said softly. In second chances. Lucas smiled, pressing a kiss to her palm. Speaking of new beginnings, I have a surprise for you. From his pocket he produced an official-looking document. Lillian unfolded it carefully, eyes widening as she read. A divorce decree. She looked up in confusion. But how? Sheriff Miller helped. He's had his eye on Barrett for some time, suspected him of various unsavory dealings. When I explained the situation, he was eager to assist. Lucas squeezed her hand. Barrett's abandonment, followed by his fleeing justice, gave the judge grounds to grant a divorce in absentia. You're officially free of him, Lillian. Lillian stared at the paper that severed the last legal tie to her painful past. So our marriage is now beyond question, Lucas finished. Not that I ever doubted it. Lillian threw her arms around his neck, the divorce decree clutched in one hand. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder, for everything. As winter once again blanketed the Colorado landscape, the Blackburn ranch stood warm against the cold. The expanded cabin, now fully complete with a nursery adjoining the main bedroom, glowed with lamplight as snow fell softly outside. Inside, Lillian sat in a rocking chair by the fire, a small bundle cradled in her arms. The birth 2 weeks earlier had been long but ultimately uncomplicated, with a midwife from Prospect attending and Lucas pacing anxiously nearby. He has your eyes, Lillian said softly as Lucas knelt beside the chair, gazing in wonder at their son. And your determination, Lucas replied, touching a gentle finger to the infant's cheek. Never seen a baby so intent on arriving once he made up his mind. William Lucas Blackburn, named for Lillian's father, and his own yawned and stretched one tiny hand toward his father's voice. Lucas caught the miniature fingers in his much larger hand, marveling at the perfection of each tiny nail. Hard to believe it's been a year, he said, looking up at Lillian. 1 year since I found you in the snow. Lillian smiled, the memory no longer frightening but miraculous in retrospect. You saved my life that day. We saved each other, Lucas corrected gently. I was existing before you came, not really living. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the windows in a sound that once meant danger and despair to Lillian. Now it merely emphasized the warmth within the safety and love that surrounded her family. I received another letter from Father yesterday, she said. He's planning to visit in the spring once travel is easier. He's eager to meet his grandson. We'll have the guest room ready, Lucas promised. And perhaps by then we'll have more news to share. Lillian raised an eyebrow. More news. Lucas's smile was both shy and hopeful. I thought perhaps William might like a brother or sister in time, Though not too soon, he added hastily. You need to recover properly first. Warmth that had nothing to do with the fire spread through Lillian's chest. I think that sounds wonderful, she said softly. A house full of children, growing up loved and safe. With a mother who teaches them kindness and courage, Lucas added, and reminds them daily what strength truly looks like. As little William drifted to sleep in his mother's arms, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought her here from desperate abandonment to profound belonging. The road had been difficult, marked by pain and fear, but it had led to this moment of perfect contentment. Outside, the Colorado winter raged on, powerless against the warmth within these walls. Once, Lillian had nearly perished in such a storm. Now, she thrived despite it, or perhaps because of it, for without that desperate night, she would never have found her way to Lucas, to this home, to this love. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, noticing her distant expression. Lillian smiled, the last shadows of her past fading in the light of her present joy. "I'm thinking that sometimes we must weather storms to find our shelter." Lucas rose from his knees, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead, then to their sleeping son's brow. "Then I'm grateful for the storm that brought you to me, Lillian Blackburn." As night settled fully over the Colorado mountains, the small family remained by the hearth, surrounded by the home they had built together, not just of logs and nails, but of trust reconstructed, of wounds healed, of love freely given and joyfully received. The wind might howl and the snow might fall, but within these walls, spring had already bloomed, a permanent season of the heart that no winter could touch.